Fey Evolution Merchant Chapter 1, 100 Questions Beast and Sound Bird. The rain hadn't stopped pouring for 24 hours. When the originally hot and stuffy summer was complemented with the moisture, it made it rather hard for anyone to breathe in this environment. In this humid heat, an outgoing but frail-looking youth was holding an old-fashioned AI mobile phone. He was fiddling with it for a long time before the phone finally let out its distinctive startup sound. Lin Yuan sighed in relief when he found out that his mobile phone wasn't faulty. He wouldn't be able to afford a new one. After switching it on, Lin Yuan logged into the Fey website that he frequented. He discovered that his account actually had 99+ notifications when he had merely replied to one question. When he had been unable to sleep that night, Lin Yuan had stumbled upon a forum post where someone asked for a solution after getting bitten by a ghost shadow-bristled spider. He had answered it in a casual manner. Do not panic when bitten by the ghost shadow-bristled spider. Drink hot water with woad root, then clean the wound. To prevent your corpse from smelling bad, find a shady and ventilated place under a tree, and lie down. If your finances are enough, it is best to lay down a bamboo mat under your body. While looking through all sorts of fancy replies, Lin Yuan heard a delicate sound. Suddenly, an ash-black cat pounced on his legs, which was followed by the sounds of flapping wings. A sparrow-like bird that was entirely cyan landed on Lin Yuan's shoulders and let out 2 chirps. He quickly put down his mobile phone and asked the ash-black cat that was clinging to his legs, "Genius, what is the temperature of the store now?" The cat leaped off from Lin Yuan's legs, before replying with a coquettish and sweet voice, "The room temperature is 34 degrees Celsius. Yuan, it is time for you to ventilate it and dissipate the heat." In response, Lin Yuan carried the ash-black cat in a practiced motion before running downstairs, with the cyan bird that had been chirping still on his shoulder. As dawn broke across the sky, Lin Yuan opened up the windows in an efficient manner before he carefully walked in front of the flower racks. At that moment, the ash-black cat spoke again. "Lin Yuan, eat your medicine first." Lin Yuan immediately stopped in his tracks and went to pour some water instead. At the same time, the cyan bird brought over the medicine tablet with its beak. Lin Yuan received the tablet from the bird and threw the tablet into his mouth, before gulping it down with a cup of water. The cyan bird then started a song involuntarily, but Lin Yuan swiftly covered its beak. "Chimey, if you sing now, Auntie Zhang from next door will come over again." The talking cat, which was previously on Lin Yuan's legs, and the bird on his shoulder, which could sing, seemed mystical. However, a century after the spirit chi awakening, the ash-black cat and cyan bird were now common existences. Almost everyone had one of them. The cat was called Genius, and it was a 100 questions beast. It was a walking encyclopedia and could even fill in the role of a simple lifestyle butler. It was considered a housekeeping beast. However, it was different from other 100 questions beasts on the market, as this ash-black cat was much skinnier and smaller. It truly looked like it was undernourished. This cat may have been birthed by a mother 100 questions beast, but because its fur didn't have an even distribution of black, it looked as though it was dirty, and consequently, its owner couldn't sell it for a long time. The boss that was selling spirit pets had simply given a 50% discount on the price and let Lin Yuan have it. As for the singing bird, it was a sound bird. It was very rare to see sound birds getting sold on the market due to the fact that most of the sound birds had already evolved into songstress birds. A songstress bird was just like a living music player, and clever songstress birds could learn over 100 songs. As for this cyan and sparrow-like sound bird on Lin Yuan's shoulder, it was a sound bird that had failed to evolve into a songstress bird. When the boss had seen Lin Yuan hesitating to buy the 100 questions beast, he had added this sound bird as a gift to Lin Yuan. After receiving Lin Yuan's training for over 2 years, the sound bird was able to sing one song now. Chimey was the name of this little sound bird. When it had first arrived in this home, it had always been disheartened and drooping its head. All living things had a spirit and could naturally feel everything in their vicinity. Therefore, Lin Yuan would always praise Chimey to slowly build its confidence. As a result, Chimey had been especially lively after learning one song. An undernourished and abandoned 100 questions beast, a sound bird that had been treated like trash after failing to evolve, and a frail youth. No matter what, the trio looked like a rather weak combination. However, they were managing the Fey store left behind by his parents in an orderly manner. After consuming the medicine, Lin Yuan walked to the flower racks and carefully took down the black cloth that covered them. 5 succulent lotus flower-like plants were growing in the pots. They had an emerald green color and a faint fragrance that was almost undetectable. When Lin Yuan took a closer look at these 5 stalks of jasmine lilies, he couldn't help but sigh after seeing one of the stalks. One of the jasmine lily's leaves had turned soft. When is this scorching weather going to end? The jasmine lilies were a class of common healing-type fey plants. A century after the spirit chi awakening, all living things in the world were influenced by the spirit chi and had different evolution variations. The jasmine lily had been a type of succulent plant before the spirit chi awakening, and it was one of those plants that had evolved. If its owner accidentally cut their finger when chopping ingredients, they simply had to put a jasmine lily at the bedside, and by the next day, the cut on the finger would be completely healed. Of course, there were also spirit chi professionals that chose the jasmine lily as a contract fey. However, the jasmine lily was a fey of the lowest grade, and it was extremely difficult to evolve. These 5 pots of jasmine lilies in Lin Yuan's store were all normal grade. If they could pass elite grade and reach the doorsteps of bronze grade, then the jasmine lilies would be comparable with other excellent healing-type fey plants. All living things had their status determined by fate. Low-grade feys were neglected because it was truly hard to evolve them. However, it would have been different if a low-grade fey was guaranteed to evolve into a high-grade fey. In fact, Lin Yuan heard rumors that low-grade feys had certain aspects that would enable them to suppress high-grade feys. The rise of a low-grade fey was just like an insignificant person climbing to the clouds step by step from the earth. They were unlike high-grade feys that were born at the pinnacle. High-grade feys could also evolve, and it was relatively easier as compared to low-grade feys. That's why it was rare for people to nurture low-grade feys. The resources required to nurture a low-grade fey were enough to nurture a few high-grade feys. A good example would be why almost every individual possessed a 100 questions beast and songstress bird. In this century, after the spirit chi awakening, there had never been a case of a 100 questions beast or a songstress bird evolving. Lin Yuan carefully tended to the 5 pots of jasmine lilies by burying nutritional minerals into their soil. It might not be much of a labor, but Lin Yuan was already panting slightly. Lin Yuan's store might be called a store, but it only contained 2 types of fey plants, 5 pots of jasmine lilies and over a dozen pots of usnea. These usneas couldn't even be considered normal 1 feys. They were only considered a variant of the original usneas before the spirit chi awakening. Apart from the mild toxins, its vines now grew faster, and these vines also had increased nutrition within them. This was also why the usnea was the best fodder for low-grade herbivorous or omnivorous fey pets. Each day, these pots of usneas would give around 101 meter-long vines for Lin Yuan. To maintain my daily life, I still have to rely on these usneas. If I can sell 1 pot of these jasmine lilies, it will be considered a pleasant surprise. However, even as Lin Yuan looked at the usneas like an elderly mother, he didn't have any intention to tend to them. He basically put in all his efforts on the 5 pots of jasmine lilies. After Lin Yuan cleaned up the dust, this little fey store started its operations as usual after the morning rain. Fey Evolution Merchant Chapter 2, Copper Bracelet. When Lin Yuan opened the store, it was just a few minutes before 7 a.m. Presently, Lin Yuan was standing beside the flower racks and felt he was more tired than normal. This was the reason why he looked frail. The feeling of fatigue when he was opening the store every day was something that Lin Yuan was already used to. However, he could feel a spell of dizziness in the depths of his head, and it was seemingly getting more intensive. Meow, Yuan, go to the chair and sit for a moment. The ash-black cat immediately started to walk on Lin Yuan's pants and clothes before climbing up to his neck. The cat then trembled as it stood up and used its paw's soft pad to give Lin Yuan's head a gentle massage. The sound bird was also flying around anxiously as though it was asking why Lin Yuan looked weaker than normal. Lin Yuan then forcefully invigorated himself before hugging the 100 questions beast, Genius, in his arms. His fair fingers had very obvious and distinct bone lines as they stroked across the 100 questions beast's fur. Genius, Chimey, you don't have to worry about me. I probably didn't sleep well yesterday. While Lin Yuan was speaking, he started to ponder whether he had really caught a cold again. His finances to maintain his family's store were very tight, and it was barely enough to support his younger sister's school fees. During normal times, he would be frugal on his own meals to save up money. Poor people were most fearful of falling ill. After a century since the spirit chi awakening, all of the previously terminal illnesses were now curable with ease. As long as one could find a spirit chi professional who had contracted a high-grade healing-type fey, treatment could be completed in a single session. However, the fees for hiring spirit chi professionals with high-grade feys would be more than 3 months of operation fees for his store. Lin Yuan might have said so, but Genius and Chimey's anxiety didn't reduce at all. It was as though they were afraid of losing their most precious treasure. To Genius and Chimey, they were 2 inferior housekeeping pets that had been neglected and rejected, and Lin Yuan was their entire world. When it was at exactly 7 a.m., A forthright and shrewish voice echoed punctually at the entrance. Little Yuan, I have told you so many times not to open your store so early. You just have to open it after 8 a.m. so you can have more rest too. The one speaking was a middle-aged lady who had placed a wooden square box on Lin Yuan's reception counter. She then looked at Lin Yuan with a gentle glance before saying, same old thing. Give me 10 usnea vines. When Lin Yuan heard this rather passionate and shrewish voice, his face immediately put on a warm smile. Lin Yuan's face looked extremely amiable from afar when he had this warm smile, just like the summer breeze. Auntie Zhang, I have told you so many times that you shouldn't bring me breakfast when you come over to buy something. While speaking, Lin Yuan had already gone to harvest the usnea vines in a quick and efficient manner. A pot of usnea would grow around 13 or 14 vines, which were around 1.5 meter long, per day. One portion of the usnea vine was exactly 1 meter long. Lin Yuan's scissors snipped off 10 vines, which were all exactly 1.5 meters in length. He then used a piece of cloth to tightly wrap all 10 of the 1.5 meter vines together. Lin Yuan packed the well-grown and fresh usnea vines nicely. As Auntie Zhang was watching how Lin Yuan crouched down and proficiently packed the usnea vines, her eyes flashed with benevolence while feeling heartbroken. As an old neighbor, Auntie Zhang had been watching as Lin Yuan had no choice but to become independent at the age of 12 to support this store in order to provide for himself and his younger sister. He could barely support his younger sister to study, and Auntie Zhang could no longer remember if this was the 6th or the 7th year. When Lin Yuan brought the usnea vines to the reception counter, he just happened to see Auntie Zhang looking at him. Auntie Zhang, if I were to open my store at 8 a.m., you wouldn't be able to buy such fresh usnea vines, right? He asked. Auntie Zhang quickly withdrew her emotional eyes and laughed while saying, that is true. Why don't you learn from how the other stores are doing? These are just usneas, and you are still putting energy ores in them. How much can you earn with each usnea vine? Lin Yuan smiled and shook his head without saying anything as he listened to Auntie Zhang's suggestion. At that moment, Lin Yuan was doing his best to support his body as the spell of dizziness plaguing his mind was so intense that he felt he might collapse at any moment. Auntie Zhang understood that this youth had his own principles. Be it the opening of the store at exactly 7 a.m. each day or how he stubbornly insisted on putting energy ores in the usnea soil. While feeling heartbroken, Auntie Zhang still felt a vague admiration for this child that she had been watching grow up. It felt just like how a senior watched the junior grow into a responsible person. Auntie Zhang left behind $75 Federation before turning and walking to the entrance. She said before leaving, Little Yuan, your Uncle Li specially baked the flat sesame bread and mung bean milk for you. If you want your Uncle Li to be sad, then don't eat them. When Lin Yuan saw the extra $25 Federation on the table, he took the money and was about to call out to Auntie Zhang. All of a sudden, his dizziness intensified, and his eyes turned blurry before he fainted. When Auntie Zhang walked away, she felt rather pleased. Every time when she wanted to give Little Yuan extra money, he would never accept it. This time, since she had walked away fast enough, Little Yuan would probably accept it. However, just as she was at the store's entrance, she heard a clatter as though something had fallen onto the ground. Just before the clattering sound echoed, the sound bird and the 100 questions beast let out anxious cries. Auntie Zhang quickly turned around and noticed that Lin Yuan had collapsed on the ground with the $25 in his hand. His eyes were silently closed, and his face looked calm, as though he was sleeping. Auntie Zhang hurried over with worry to help up Lin Yuan. The moment before Lin Yuan closed his eyes and fainted, his ears could vaguely hear the anxious cries of Genius, Chimey, and Auntie Zhang. Immediately after, his consciousness became murky. In this murky state, it felt just like a swamp that would trap a person's feet, making it hard to move. It was viscous and deathly still. rewebnovel.com. After fainting, Lin Yuan gradually awakened in a strange environment. His mind flashed with the face of his younger sister, Genius, and Chimey. These three individuals were his closest kin and his greatest worries. If he died, he didn't know how heartbroken his young sister would be, nor whether anyone would take care of Chimey and Genius. It was fortunate that he had already saved up enough to pay for his young sister's school fees for next year. Lin Yuan's consciousness started walking around in this chaotic place. It was unknown how long he had been walking. All of a sudden, at the end of the chaotic place, Lin Yuan saw something that he was extremely familiar with. It was a simple and unadorned copper-colored bracelet. This bracelet had been Lin Yuan's secret for all this time. In fact, this life was actually Lin Yuan's second life. His previous life had been high-spirited, and he had been in his prime. Unfortunately, he had died early at the age of 30. Upon opening his eyes, he was a newly born infant 1 century after the spirit chi awakening. When he had been reborn, this copper bracelet had accompanied him. Since then, he had been wearing this bracelet on his wrist. However, when he was 8 years old, it had accidentally gotten smeared by his own blood and mysteriously vanished. He would never have expected to discover the copper-colored bracelet in the depths of this place. The copper bracelet was currently flickering with a faint light. It caused the depths of his consciousness to be brimming with a tea-like ripple with jade luster. This bracelet was just like a door that was waiting for Lin Yuan's consciousness to step across it. Fey Evolution Merchant Dash. Chapter 3, Morbius. It was a kind of intangible calling, yet it was also the most congenial type of calling. It was just like how fate subtly had guided Newton to the apple tree, and with great coincidence, the apple had fallen off from the tree. Just as Lin Yuan's consciousness crossed into the simple copper-colored ring of light, the light ring suddenly lit up with mottled and complicated patterns. These patterns couldn't be described as anything else but strange. They were all intersected with each other, but had this unimaginable swiftness. Lin Yuan felt indescribably relaxed after passing through this simple and unadorned ring of light. In this relaxed state, Lin Yuan was actually able to sense the world's spirit chi that was surrounding his body. It was a kind of sensation that Lin Yuan hadn't felt since he had been 8 years old, when the copper bracelet had been stained with his blood and vanished without a trace. When the copper bracelet had vanished, it hadn't just robbed his senses toward the world's spirit chi, but it had also robbed his spiritual energy. Presently, his spiritual energy might still be as dried up as before, but now, he could at least sense the spirit chi in the world. His body had become so frail because he could no longer sense the world's spirit chi. After the spirit chi awakening, spirit chi had become this world's most fundamental energy. The planet's native animals and plants had all been able to evolve toward 2 traits due to spirit chi's influence. One of the traits was to revert to their ancestors' wild nature, enhancing the physical body's capabilities. The other trait was to transform spiritually and focus on energy attacks. As for humans, they had also developed spirit chi occupations under the influence of spirit chi. There were all sorts of spirit chi occupations, but they fundamentally used spirit chi to enhance the body. Since Lin Yuan had stopped sensing spirit chi at the age of 8, he had no longer relied on spirit chi to improve his body's capabilities. He had been relying on nature to grow and food to obtain energy. Lin Yuan felt involuntarily excited. Although he didn't know why his body was unable to store spirit chi, he could at least sense its existence now. He might be able to absorb spirit chi at an appalling speed that no one had witnessed before, but the spirit chi that gathered in his body would quickly leak out of his hands. His body was just like a funnel, and this was why Lin Yuan knew that he was destined to fail as a spirit chi professional. Despite the case that all spirit chi coursing through the body wouldn't remain, he would still be able to enhance his body's capabilities through this process. This way, he would no longer have to consume medicine, which was meant to nurture his body. Over the span of a year, he would be able to save up a huge sum of money. His young sister was already coming to the age that she could form a contract with her first fae. With all the money that he saved up, he would be able to purchase a fae, which would be considered superior among normal faes, for his young sister. In fact, he might be able to purchase a low-tier elite fae. This body can finally sense spirit chi. However, Lin Yuan didn't finish the rest of the sentence. Lin Yuan was always optimistic. However, even though he could sense spirit chi now, Lin Yuan felt it was a pity that his spiritual energy remained weak like before. A century after the spirit chi awakening, the spiritual energy was something that was as important as spirit chi. Spirit chi professionals could form contracts with faes. Faes were sorted into healing type, offense type, defense type, and support type. Among them, offense type and support type faes were the most in numbers. In order to form a contract with faes, one would require spiritual energy. A regular person would be able to form contracts with 2 to 3 faes in a lifetime, and prodigies might be able to form up to 5 contracts. One's strength would undergo a significant increase with each additional fae. Nevertheless, the resources required to nurture an additional fae would also increase significantly. In regard to faes, the most difficult aspect was to evolve them. The resources required for each evolution was far beyond what Lin Yuan, an owner of a small spirit store, could afford. Lin Yuan's spiritual energy was weak and frail, like a thread of hair. Back when Lin Yuan had formed contracts with domestic faes like the 100 Questions Beast and the Sound Bird, he had fainted and had been unconscious for 3 full days. After waking up, Lin Yuan had had a splitting headache for at least half a month. This had given Lin Yuan a direct cognition of how frail his spiritual energy was. When he had been born, his spiritual energy hadn't been superior, but it hadn't been inferior either. His spiritual energy had become frail at the same time when he could no longer sense spirit chi. The reason that his spiritual energy had been weak was probably due to this copper bracelet. This copper bracelet had transmigrated to this world along with him, but it was also the reason he had become weak and useless. Lin Yuan couldn't help but have a complicated opinion of the copper bracelet. At that moment, Lin Yuan could only feel his feet stepping on the ground's hard surface. When he looked up, Lin Yuan noticed he was in another spatial zone, which was around 40 square meters. The ground was copper in color within this spatial zone, and there was a 5-meter or 6-meter pool. Apart from that, there was nothing else. When Lin Yuan walked to the poolside, he noticed that the water was extremely clear, and it could reflect a youth's face. The pool wasn't deep, as it was only around half a meter in depth. Lin Yuan crouched down and scooped up a handful of water. He could feel that the water was mild in temperature. When he smelled the water, he realized that it was just regular water as it didn't contain spirit chi. While pondering, Lin Yuan felt his wrist area becoming heavy. He noticed that his wrist was now wearing that simple and unadorned copper bracelet. At that moment, the copper bracelet emitted a trace of desire to communicate with him. This desire to communicate contained feelings of fondness, timidness, and confusion. It felt just like a child's wisdom that had just been developed. As soon as Lin Yuan used his consciousness to make contact with the copper bracelet, everything that Lin Yuan didn't understand ever since the age of 8 had all been answered. It turns out that this copper bracelet, which transmigrated with me, is actually a fae. When I was 8 years old, I stained the copper bracelet with my blood and actually formed a contract with it because of my mistake. I actually formed a contract with a fae at the age of 8 by accident. Lin Yuan was in disbelief. He used his left hand to touch the copper bracelet that was on his right wrist, and immediately a wave of calmness washed over him, helping him recover from the state of instability. He now had a contracted fae too, and he might be able to earn much more money from now on. Furthermore, his young sister's fae wouldn't need to be of a normal or elite grade anymore. If he worked hard, he might be able to give his younger sister a bronze fae, right? In fact, to a certain extent, only when a fae reached bronze grade would it be considered as a true fae. Previously, Lin Yuan had complicated thoughts toward this copper bracelet. However, after thinking it through, Lin Yuan understood why he only had a trace of spiritual energy, which had been just enough for him to lead a normal life for the past 10 years. He also understood why the copper bracelet had been silent and had not communicated with him for 10 years. The copper bracelet had been trying to protect the 8-year-old Lin Yuan, who hadn't had powerful spiritual energy. Thus, it had chosen to hibernate. The hibernation had slowed down the contract's forming, so it had taken 10 years to form the complete contract. Today was also the day when the copper bracelet awakened. When it sensed Lin Yuan's emotional reactions, the copper bracelet on his right wrist emitted a gentle feeling. It felt like it was trying to soothe or mentally hint for Lin Yuan to calm down. Upon sensing that Lin Yuan was calming down, the copper bracelet tightened and secured itself firmly on Lin Yuan's right wrist. It felt as though it was holding Lin Yuan's hands tightly and saying, "Pleased to meet you, Lin Yuan." Lin Yuan revealed a smile, which was like the sunshine during dawn that broke through the darkness. It was just like the rising sun's silhouette behind the mountain. The youth then said with a gentle and mild voice, "Pleased to meet you, Morbius." Fae Evolution Merchant Chapter 4, Exclusive Skill. After forming a contract with a human, no matter what kind of fae, even a normal one, would possess an ability. The type of ability was most probably a species innate ability. Take Jasmine Lily as an example. Even if a person were to form a contract with a normal Jasmine Lily, they would get a healing ability. The comprehended ability was also the most fundamental. For a fae to obtain a powerful ability, it would need to evolve to bronze grade and awaken its exclusive skill. Subsequently, the exclusive skill could be used to complement the abilities to achieve overwhelmingly powerful changes. This was also why people said that reaching bronze grade was the true beginning of a fae. Therefore, for any spirit chi professional who had a little background, they would always pick a bronze fae for their first contract. When a fae reached bronze grade, they would awaken different bronze grade skills. That also applied to faes of the same species. This uniqueness allowed spirit chi professionals to pick a fae which had awakened a skill that was more compatible or helpful to themselves. In order to form a contract with a fae, one needed spiritual energy, as it could fuse one's soul with the fae's soul. That's why once someone formed a contract, the difficulty in dissolving it would be as hard as ascending to the heavens. This was also why many experts who had formed contracts with low-grade faes due to insufficient resources didn't replace them after the former got stronger. Instead, They would use resources to evolve their low-grade phase. Lin Yuan was observing Morbius as he wanted to check its attribute. Presently, Morbius' level of spirituality only allowed it to express subtle emotions. In order to have a regular conversation with Morbius, Lin Yuan would have to recover for some time. When checking on Morbius' attribute, Lin Yuan discovered that it was merely a normal Fey. However, Morbius' attribute wasn't like a normal Fey. Because Morbius didn't just have an ability, it had an exclusive skill. Everyone knew that exclusive skills were something that only Bronze Fays would possess. Heavens, my contracted Fey, Morbius, seems rather powerful. Lin Yuan's irises expanded as he was rather surprised. Morbius, which had come to this world at the same time as him, had an exclusive skill when it was at normal grade. If Morbius reached bronze grade and awakened another exclusive skill, it would possess dual exclusive skills. However, in Legends, only when someone nurtured a Fey into a fantasy breed would it possess dual exclusive skills. Fantasy breeds had always been a legend, and Lin Yuan could not get any access to such privy information right now. Nevertheless, when compared with ordinary Feys, fantasy breeds were in another league. Soon, joy replaced Lin Yuan's amazement. Suddenly, he felt Morbius sending an emotional signal asking him to use its first ability on it. Lin Yuan immediately used Morbius' first ability after receiving the request. Once Lin Yuan executed the first ability, he looked at Morbius and realized that all information had been presented in a data format. Fey name, Morbius. Fey lifeform species, Fey grade, normal, 1/10. Fey type, spatial/mystery. Fey quality, normal. Abilities. True data, all complicated information that is invisible to the eye is turned into data. Information that is turned into data might contain truth that cannot be distinguished on the surface. Calm mind, passive ability. Effects of calm mind can be improved according to the Fey's grade. Calm mind can stabilize the mind and has a certain probability of resisting negative conditions. Exclusive skill. Spirit Lock, Morbius Spatial Zone, can be used to nurture Feys. The initial grade of the Fey that Morbius Spatial Zone can nurture must not be higher than Morbius grade. Morbius isn't able to increase its grade by itself, so its grade will be increased along with the Fey's grade that it nurtures. At the same time, Morbius can obtain the initial ability of the Fey that it nurtures. However, Morbius will not obtain abilities when its grade increases. Whenever Morbius increases a grade, it will be able to nurture one more Fey. Morbius' method of growth will remain unchanged. When Lin Yuan read the information presented by Morbius' true data, his smile froze on his face. A short moment after the frozen smile, Lin Yuan trembled as he sent a message to Morbius. After obtaining Morbius' confirmation, Lin Yuan nearly collapsed. This is a goddamn fraud. Morbius is a normal I-1 Fey right now. That means that I can only use the Spirit Lock ability to form a contract with a normal I-Fey. Moreover, the amount of resources to nurture a Fey is already overwhelming, and my current spiritual energy doesn't allow me to contract with any Fey, even if it is a normal one. The Fey might be living inside Morbius' spatial zone, but Lin Yuan should still be the one that formed the contract. Lin Yuan was still traumatized by the horrible incident when he had formed a contract with the domestic beasts, Chimey and Genius. The terrifying thing was that Morbius' Spirit Lock spatial zone could only allow one more contracted Fey after an increase in grade. Morbius could only increase its grade by nurturing the Fey. With so much investment, the return would only be the contracted Fey's initial and fundamental ability. The ratio of investment and return wasn't proportionate. In addition, it was challenging to evolve a Fey, especially low-grade ones. When did Lin Yuan have the capability to evolve constantly low-grade Feys? The Spirit Lock skill would probably deplete a rich person's wealth in an instant. Therefore, there was no need to mention a person like Lin Yuan, who was almost penniless. A sense of loss quickly replaced Lin Yuan's joy in obtaining a contracted Fey. However, Lin Yuan's optimistic attitude adjusted soon. He was in a much better situation than before. The future might still be filled with difficulties, but his journey in this life had always been filled with thorns. At least, he could see a direction to the future right now, so there wasn't a need to be at a loss. The trouble-filled past should be forgotten as the future path was bright and dazzling. Just as Lin Yuan was adjusting his mentality, Morbius transferred a rather faint strand of spiritual energy to his mind. The strand-like spiritual energy in his mind suddenly increased by over 5 times. Unfortunately, it was just slightly thicker than a strand of hair and wasn't even 1/10 of a regular person. Nonetheless, this spiritual energy amount was enough to form a contract with a normal I-Fey plant. It was probably insufficient to form contracts with animals. According to general knowledge, contracting animals would require more spiritual energy than to contract a fey plant. The only exception would be if one could obtain the egg of the animal. When the animal hatched from the egg, it would be the moment its spiritual energy was the most inexperienced. Thus, one might form a contract with it. After receiving the spiritual energy, Lin Yuan felt Morbius becoming weak. Morbius had forced out some of its spiritual energy and transferred it to Lin Yuan. Everyone said that fays had spirituality, and once they formed a contract with a human, the fey would stay with the human for an entire lifetime. Lin Yuan didn't have a chance to experience it before, but after witnessing Morbius' actions, Lin Yuan immediately understood the statement's significance. From now on, they would be interdependent until death. Fey Evolution Merchant Chapter 5, Clear Pond Carp. Morbius fell back into a deep slumber after transferring its spiritual energy. Lin Yuan carefully observed the spatial zone he was in. This spatial zone should be meant for nurturing fays, as mentioned from the exclusive skill, Spirit Lock. Before Lin Yuan could conduct more detailed observations, he could vaguely hear something. A familiar voice was calling him, and it sounded rather anxious. Why isn't little Yuan waking up? Doctor, didn't you say that his spirit merely received stimulation and is in a fatigued state? Why doesn't he look any better after half a day? The voice belonged to Auntie Zhang, and due to anxiety, she was constantly asking questions. Yuan, Yuan, meow, meow. It was the 100 Questions Beast's voice. Genius could communicate in human language, but it would unconsciously emit bestial sounds when it was anxious. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The sound bird, Chimey, was also anxiously chirping. When Lin Yuan had suddenly fainted, Auntie Zhang, Genius, and Chimey had all been shocked. At that moment, Lin Yuan's consciousness finally returned to his body. When he opened his eyes, he immediately saw Chimey standing on his nose and looking at him nervously. He then saw Auntie Zhang constantly questioning the doctor, which made the doctor's forehead sweat profusely. Lin Yuan suddenly opened his eyes and unwittingly frightened Chimey, causing it to jump up and chirp twice. It then immediately reacted joyfully and hopped on Lin Yuan's nose while chirping cheerfully. Genius also scuttled along Lin Yuan's neck area and carefully rubbed its body against his neck. Perhaps it was frightened witless earlier, as Genius was actually trembling a little. Auntie Zhang heard Chimey and Genius' responses, and when she turned around, she happened to see Lin Yuan opening his eyes. She couldn't be bothered with questioning the doctor anymore. When she saw that Lin Yuan wanted to get up, she immediately said, "Little Yuan, lie back down. I will get the doctor to check on you again. You have been unconscious for close to 10 hours. It is already evening now. If you have an illness, you have to treat it as soon as possible. Otherwise, a common illness might also lead to severe illness." Auntie Zhang's concern warmed Lin Yuan's heart. He had received plenty of care from Auntie Zhang for the past few years. However, Lin Yuan knew that his body didn't have any problem. He had fainted because of Morbius' awakening and because he had formed a contract with Morbius. Auntie Zhang was still not at ease, and just as she was about to say something, the doctor walked over and said, "Kid, you truly frightened your aunt with your illness. I will use the clear pond carp to heal you." The doctor immediately summoned his contracted fey, which was a half-foot-long, greenish-black carp. The carp had massive scales on the side of its body, and when the doctor activated the ability, one of the sparkling scales fell off. It floated in front of Lin Yuan while he felt a warm spiritual world that was extremely comfortable. At that moment, Lin Yuan secretly activated Morbius' ability, True Data, to check on the Clear Pond Carp's attribute. Fey name, Clear Pond Carp. Fey species, Carp subspecies/Carp species. Fey grade, Elite, 4 out of 10. Fey type, Water. Fey quality, Elite. Abilities. Tail lash, jumps up and uses the fish's tail to execute a lash attack. Clear scales, gradually recover spiritual trauma. It is able to alleviate abnormal spiritual conditions. Upon seeing the Clear Pond Carp species, Lin Yuan felt that its attribute was normal, but to his surprise, it was an elite fey. After reading through the Clear Pond Carp's information, Lin Yuan felt that this doctor was very fortunate. Clear Pond Carps were very ordinary water-type fays, and when they were at normal grade, their initial abilities would be physical ones, such as tail lash or fin flap. Unexpectedly, when this Clear Pond Carp had reached elite grade, it had awakened the rare ability, Clear Scales. It allowed the Clear Pond Carp to transform into a dragon one and obtain an uncommon spirit healing ability. Soon, more perspiration appeared on the doctor's forehead. When the Clear Pond Carp scale lost its luster, the doctor stopped the ability, and the fallen scale turned into ashes. A freeway novel. There is nothing major. You will recover very quickly if you have more rest and consume more nutritional food. While speaking, the doctor was about to use his sleeve to wipe off his sweat, but Auntie Zhang handed over a tissue. Doctor, it has been hard on you. Please, clean your sweat with this. The doctor received the tissue from Auntie Zhang and said, I am done with the healing, so I shall leave first. It is rather late. My wife is still waiting for me to have a meal. The doctor packed up his things and walked out of the store. When he left, his forehead might still be covered in sweat, but his eyes betrayed his delight. He might be a small-time doctor, but the joy of healing and saving others was a rather satisfying reward. After the doctor left, Auntie Zhang looked at Lin Yuan with concern and said, Little Yuan, if you aren't feeling well, don't force yourself. Your body is your capital. If you fall sick, what will little Si do? Auntie Zhang was afraid that Lin Yuan would neglect his body, so she intentionally mentioned his young sister, who was studying far away. Auntie Zhang, don't worry, I will bring you the doctor's fees tomorrow. I am really sorry for troubling you for the entire day. Lin Yuan had a sincere expression as he spoke. Then, he stood up and saw the usneas growing with vines that were almost 3 meters in length. He couldn't help but sigh at the sight. He then poured a cup of water for Auntie Zhang with gratitude. Little Yuan, don't be so courteous with me. Your Uncle Li and I have watched you growing up after all. Auntie Zhang received the cup of water, downed it in one mouthful, and burped. She had been so anxious to the point she had forgotten about drinking water all day. After drinking the water, Auntie Zhang noticed that Lin Yuan was insisting on being courteous, so she didn't say anything else, aware that this youth had his own resolutions. Upon seeing Auntie Zhang's empty cup, Lin Yuan was about to pour more water, but she shook her hand. Little Yuan, give me 1 pot of jasmine lily. I will put it at your Uncle Li's bedside later. At the same time, Auntie Zhang took out 500 Federation dollars and placed them in Lin Yuan's hands. Lin Yuan looked at the money and said helplessly, Auntie Zhang, you have been buying a pot of jasmine lily every month. Sometimes, you even buy 1 pot within the same month. You really don't need to. Before Lin Yuan could finish his sentence, Auntie Zhang interrupted him. Can't your Auntie Zhang put more pots in her house? Lin Yuan didn't have a choice but to bring a pot of jasmine lily to Auntie Zhang. He picked the one that was in the best condition, but Auntie Zhang had already carried the pot that had softened leaves and would only last for a few days. I shall take this as it looks rather faded with me, she said. The scene of Auntie Zhang carrying that jasmine lily caused Lin Yuan's heart to surge with warmth. It was always like this, she would use the same tone and attitude and would carry the same kind of jasmine lily. Suddenly, little thud, thud, thud sounds echoed. They came from a rabbit, which was like a middle-sized dog. Its fur was a mix of red and black, its palm leaf-like ears were massive, almost its body height, and it also looked like a mouse. When Genius and Chimey heard its signature sounds, they quickly rushed to the entrance. Genius lay on the large rabbit's body, while Chimey landed on the large rabbit's head. This large rabbit was none other than Auntie Zhang's contracted fae. It was also Genius and Chimey's only spirit beast friend for the past few years. The large rabbit ran toward Auntie Zhang, one of its ears was carrying a package that was wrapped in blue cloth. Lin Yuan had always been under the impression that it was a terror rabbit. However, when he activated True Data to check the rabbit that he was very familiar with, Lin Yuan realized that it wasn't the case. Fae Evolution Merchant Chapter 6, Fantasy Breed that is severely injured. Lin Yuan was naturally curious and consciously looked at Auntie Zhang's terror rabbit, which he had frequently interacted with because of the new ability. After reading through the information his True Data had compiled, it seemed that this rabbit wasn't a terror rabbit. Its current appearance was merely a powerful Fae's camouflaging ability. Unexpectedly, True Data also revealed that this powerful Fae was in a severely injured state. This powerful Fae's abilities and skills were in a locked condition. It seems like the injuries don't allow this Fae to release any ability. Although the new pieces of information were surprising enough, Lin Yuan was awestruck because of something else he had noticed. 2 skills were actually locked. Could this be a legendary fantasy breed? Lin Yuan suddenly recalled True Data's second part. Information that is turned into data might contain truth that cannot be distinguished on the surface. It seems that the pieces of information turned into data are indeed more reliable than seeing with the eyes. This discovery left Lin Yuan rather shaken as it looked like Auntie Zhang was also a person with a story. But who didn't have a story? Anyway, these things were of little importance as Auntie Zhang would always be Auntie Zhang to Lin Yuan. If he became capable enough in the future, he would definitely heal Auntie Zhang's terror rabbit. No, the powerful Fae. When Auntie Zhang noticed that Lin Yuan's complexion was no longer pale and his cheeks were even rosier than this morning, she felt at ease. Then, she removed the blue cloth-wrapped package from her Terra rabbit's ear and placed it on Lin Yuan's reception counter. "Little Yuan, this is a nutritional meal that your Uncle Li specially prepared for you after finding out that you fainted. Your Uncle Li's legs aren't good, and it isn't convenient for him to deliver it personally. Thus, he sent this troublemaker to deliver it to you." After speaking, Auntie Zhang rubbed the Terra rabbit's ear and looked at its warm-filled eyes. Then, she passed the meal box to Lin Yuan, and before he could speak, Auntie Zhang waved her hand without turning back and left with the withered jasmine lily. Lin Yuan didn't say anything and watched quietly as Auntie Zhang left. He clenched his fist tightly as though he was encouraging himself and as though he had set his mind on something. A person must have some goals. Without a burden, how would one be able to progress unyieldingly? The sky gradually turned dark. Presently, Lin Yuan, Chimey, and Genius were the only ones in the store. It might not have visitors, but it wasn't cheerless and cold. On the contrary, it was very lively and warm. Evidently, Genius and Chimey still had lingering fears. They were chattering around Lin Yuan and afraid that something else might happen to him. Lin Yuan knew that Chimey and Genius were worried sick, so he reached out his hand to rub Genius' chin. Soon enough, Genius let out a purring sound as it enjoyed the treatment. Chimey's little talons were holding onto Lin Yuan's ear while its tiny head plunged into his hair as though it was playing hide-and-seek. Lin Yuan unwrapped the package, and a bamboo meal box appeared. He opened up the meal box, and the fragrance of the food immediately wafted in the air. On the topmost box, there was a full layer of rice. When he removed the topmost box, Lin Yuan discovered that the bottom box was filled with red braised meat, stir-fried long beans, and pan-fried fish. Lin Yuan had been unconscious for an entire day, and he had yet to eat or drink anything. Naturally, his stomach uncontrollably started to rumble. This wasn't the first time Lin Yuan had tasted Uncle Li's cooking. Every other day, Uncle Li would find all sorts of excuses for the Terra rabbit or Auntie Zhang to deliver food for him. Lin Yuan had visited Uncle Li last year, and his leg injuries were already getting worse. Presently, he was no longer able to walk outside. Lin Yuan pondered over the Terra rabbit's existence and speculated that Uncle Li and Auntie Zhang were both formidable individuals. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to possess a fantasy breed, a fae with dual exclusive skills. Lin Yuan was unaware of Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li's past and could not get involved. He merely hoped that he would be formidable enough to heal the Terra rabbit and Uncle Li's legs one day. As Lin Yuan opened the meal box, Genius and Chimey leaned over. Chimey took a whiff of the fragrance and flapped its wings, flying to a small pot of usnea. Lin Yuan was especially nurturing this small pot of usnea for Chimey. Chimey was a sound bird and was considered an omnivore, but as compared to cooked food, Chimey preferred to eat the usnea's leaves. Chimey delightfully pecked on the usnea leaves, while Genius was looking intently at the food in the meal box. It was sitting there, obediently. Upon noticing how Genius was staring at the red braised meat, Lin Yuan smiled and picked out the largest piece of red braised meat for Genius. "Go ahead and eat, you little greedy cat." Genius looked at the large piece of red braised meat and couldn't stop swallowing its saliva. However, it used its small paw to push the meat back to Lin Yuan. It then picked the smallest piece of red braised meat in the meal box before letting out a meow. It was asking for Lin Yuan to eat the large piece of meat, while it would eat the small piece of meat. The 100 Questions Beast's actions made Lin Yuan's eyes warm up a little. He brought a small bowl, before picking a few large pieces of red braised meat and fried fish. He then mixed them with a scoop of rice and placed it in front of the 100 Questions Beast. "Genius, Chimey, in the future, we will be eating better." During the past 2 days, the 100 Questions Beast and Sound Bird had suffered along with him. Such words were something that Lin Yuan wasn't able to normally say as he didn't have the confidence. However, he now had his own contracted fae, and his body wasn't as frail as before because he could sense spirit chi. He firmly believed that their lives would definitely improve now. The world was a difficult place, but plenty of people were able to survive and prosper. Young people should have aspirations and strive for greatness. Lin Yuan had to plan for his future, or else he would remain an ordinary person no matter how many years passed. After eating dinner, Lin Yuan conducted a routine check on the 4 pots of jasmine lilies that were left in his store. All 4 pots of jasmine lilies were growing rather well. Since he had inspected the jasmine lilies' growth, Lin Yuan turned to speak with Genius, which was standing on his shoulder. "Genius, what is the temperature now?" Genius quickly replied, "Lin Yuan, the temperature is 31 degrees Celsius now." However, it is too humid. It is not advisable to expose the jasmine lilies in the night. Lin Yuan responded by taking down the fluorescent light and black cloth. He then turned to trim the usneas. He hadn't managed to sell any usneas, so the vines were already over 3 meters long. Vines that were 2 days old would have a tough texture, and the majority of the herbivorous phase didn't like eating tough vines. Lin Yuan insisted on the quality of the phase that he sold, and for vines that were tough like this, he would throw them out and wouldn't sell them. After trimming the last pot of usnea, Lin Yuan involuntarily let out a sigh. He remembered that he was still unable to store spirit qi in his body, even though he could sense it. His body was rapidly absorbing spirit qi, but Lin Yuan's hand was still holding onto the usnea's leaves. He circulated the spirit qi for a moment but stopped absorbing when he felt exhausted. Unfortunately, Lin Yuan noticed that his body still didn't contain any spirit qi. Genius felt Lin Yuan's disappointment and started to rub on Lin Yuan's cheek. It meowed but didn't say anything and just accompanied quietly by the side. Lin Yuan carried Genius before he carefully carried Chimey, which had dozed off on the small pot of usnea. He switched off the lights and went upstairs in the dark. He immediately collapsed on the bed and fell asleep. This night was serene and peaceful. A youth, 100 questions beast, and a sound bird were all sleeping soundly on a small bed. The youth was in a very deep sleep, but the 100 questions beast and the sound bird could vaguely sense something. They snuggled closer toward the youth and found comfort before falling into a deep slumber with pleasant dreams. Fey Evolution Merchant Chapter 7, Sudden Evolution. Redbud City was a small city close to the southeast of the Xia region. Because it was close to the sea, the weather was mostly rainy, and there were only a few rare days in a month when the sun could be seen. However, the sun that slowly rose up in the east would illuminate the entire city and dye half the sky in red at dawn. It was rare for the Xia region to have such great weather and clear skies. Soon enough, the sky's color was no longer hazy as there was an entire horizon of blue, just like the sea. It was so blue that it was comforting. When the rays of light passed through the windows and into the room, they happened to shine onto Lin Yuan's closed eyes. After getting dazzled by the rays of light, Lin Yuan slowly woke up from his dreams. After waking up, Lin Yuan felt that his body was very relaxed, unlike before, when his body would remain sore and fatigued even after a night's rest. It seemed like the ability to sense spirit qi and the transference of Morbius spiritual energy had strengthened his spiritual energy. It allowed his body condition to be significantly better than yesterday. When he picked up his phone to look at the time, it was already close to 6 a.m. Lin Yuan felt it was rather strange as Chimey and Genius were just like his alarm clocks, especially Genius, which would naturally wake up at 5 a.m. every day. Unexpectedly, Genius was actually still in a deep sleep today. Lin Yuan sat up, and just as he was preparing to wake up Genius and Chimey, he realized that they were surrounded by a pile of shed fur and feathers. A bundle of ash black and disordered fur was next to Genius, while a bundle of dull green feathers was around Chimey. Lin Yuan got nervous, thinking that Chimey and Genius were sick. Lin Yuan subconsciously used Morbius ability, True Data. To Lin Yuan's surprise, he realized that he could actually see Genius and Chimey's data. He had used True Data on Genius and Chimey just yesterday before checking on the Clear Pond Carp's information. However, True Data had not displayed any information on Genius and Chimey. Be it the domestic 100 questions beast, or the sound bird, which had failed to evolve into the songstress bird, they couldn't be considered as fays. That was because they hadn't even reached the standards of a normal fay. Presently, True Data's displayed information indicated that both Genius and Chimey were normal fays. This had overturned all of the knowledge that Lin Yuan had learned over a dozen years after arriving in this world. The 100 questions beast and sound bird were domestic beasts, and everyone had them. Nevertheless, there was never any case of a 100 questions beast and sound bird evolving into fays. In fact, even the sound bird's evolution, the songstress bird, wasn't qualified to be called a normal fay. But now, both these little fellows had evolved. Lin Yuan couldn't understand, but he didn't immediately wake up Genius and Chimey. Instead, he carefully cleaned up the shed fur and feathers before he went out for morning exercise. In the past, Lin Yuan's spiritual energy had been weak, and had already exhausted all of Lin Yuan's energy just to live normally. Now that his body condition had improved, Lin Yuan decided to train his body as it was all of his capital. After 1 hour of running and resting in the morning, Lin Yuan wasn't even able to breathe normally when he returned. After all, his body was still too weak. As expected, I am unable to adapt to the first day of training. But it is just a slow jog. As such, the distance ran must not be reduced. I have to persist. Lin Yuan gestured with his fist to encourage himself. After taking a shower, he noticed that Genius and Chimey were still in a deep sleep. Genius was even snoring softly. Lin Yuan carefully closed the curtains that had been opened for a very long time. He closed the door on the second floor and went downstairs to prepare for the store opening. At that moment, Lin Yuan noticed that one of the usnea pots at the corner rack had actually transformed into something different from the other usnea pots. Normally, usneas had a tender green color, while the usnea in that particular pot was dark green. Its vines were twice as thick as average usnea vines, and its leaves looked firmer too. This pot of usnea actually evolved over the night. Lin Yuan used true data to check on the usnea's information, something that was previously unavailable. Fey name, usnea. Fey species, Arum genus/Philodendron genus. Fey grade, normal, 3/10. Fey type, grass. Fey quality, elite. Its quality is actually elite. Lin Yuan couldn't help but exclaim. This usnea is indeed incredible. This pot of usnea hadn't just evolved, its quality had actually progressed too. Lin Yuan felt that this world was truly too mystical. The usnea might just be a plant rich in nutrients for herbivorous phase, but there were also high-grade usneas. However, most of the high-grade usneas were produced using energy ores and other phase, along with huge effort. However, Lin Yuan didn't use energy ores to nurture the usneas. He immediately related it to Genius and Chimey's evolutions and then took another look at the evolved usnea. He recalled that while he had been absorbing spirit chi the previous day, he had been holding its leaf. As for the other usneas, they were still the same and didn't have any changes. The phase that had evolved had been in contact with him while he had been absorbing spirit chi. Suddenly, Lin Yuan had such a bold thought that sounded unrealistic. Could it be that when I absorb spirit chi, I am not just a funnel? Instead, I can guide the spirit chi through my body and help phase evolve and even increase their quality? While thinking that, Lin Yuan couldn't help and gulp down a mouthful of saliva. Fey evolution was an extremely difficult feat. Plenty of contracted Feys were stuck at a certain grade for an entire lifetime and wouldn't be able to evolve. The difficulty of evolving Feys was also why creation masters were the most respected spirit chi professionals. In fact, it wouldn't be exaggerating to say it was the world's most respected occupation. Among the spirit chi occupations, there were combat class and lifestyle class spirit chi occupations. The combat class spirit chi occupations were further categorized into power offense type, agile offense type, defense type, support type, and healing type. The contracted phase mainly determined the types of spirit chi occupations because each spirit chi professional would be compatible with a certain type of Fey. FruEBnovel.com. After sensing the Fey, one would know which type they were more compatible with. As for the Feys that weren't as compatible, even if one had sufficient spiritual energy, it would be challenging to form a contract and might damage the spiritual energy. Among the combat class spirit chi professionals, the healing type spirit chi professionals were the rarest. Out of every 100 spirit chi professionals, there might not even be a single healing type spirit chi professional. There were plenty of lifestyle class spirit chi occupations too, but creation masters were the most respected among all of them. For combat class spirit chi professionals to evolve and increase the quality of their Fey, apart from those rare natural evolutions, the only other method was to get help from creation masters. However, the standard to become a creation master was also very high. In the entire Federation, there might be fewer than 100 new creation masters every year. Fey Evolution Merchant Chapter 8, Overall Upgrade. By comparison, becoming a creation master was as difficult as ascending to heaven. However, Lin Yuan could use his spirit chi channeling as a skill that was similar to creation masters. In fact, it was even more effective than the standard methods creation masters used. Creation masters used many different medicinal ingredients to guide and induce a phase evolution. Nonetheless, during the evolution process, there was a possibility of failure. Lin Yuan was merely channeling spirit chi into the Fey's body through his hands. His method could evolve the Fey and increase its quality, and calling it godlike was not an exaggeration. The evolution of Feys was actually similar to a chronic patient consuming medicine. After consuming medicine for a long time, the chronic patient would form a resistance and wouldn't be able to absorb the medicinal effects. A creation master's method to evolve a Fey was the same as providing treatment to a chronic patient. If the Fey was unable to absorb the medicinal effects, the creation master would use potent medicinal ingredients to form a new concoction for the Fey to absorb the medicinal effects. On the other hand, Lin Yuan simplified everything and used the most fundamental method by using his body as a medium. He would take the spirit chi that was stored in the world and use himself as the medium to transfer the spirit chi for the Fae to absorb and evolve. Freeweb, calm. Lin Yuan's method didn't need to use up as many precious resources as creation masters needed. Also, according to the Usnia's condition, it seemed like the increase of grade and quality didn't require a long period. I am going to be rich. Lin Yuan muttered to himself, while his excitement was displayed through his expressions. At the same time, Lin Yuan understood that his method would definitely be a terrifying piece of news. Thus, in order to conceal this ability, Lin Yuan would need to pass the Creation Master's test and obtain the qualification to become a Creation Master. These were just Lin Yuan's inferred thoughts, so he didn't open the store in the morning. Instead, he experimented with the rest of the Usnias by repeating what he had done the previous night. He spent 5 minutes on each pot. As a result, after a few hours, about 20 pots of Usnias had transformed into a dark green color, just like the first evolved Usnia. They were all normal grade and their quality was elite. Lin Yuan chose one of the 4 pots of jasmine lilies and ground his teeth, while his body was rapidly circulating spirit chi for 1 hour. The jasmine lilies' originally emerald green leaves had turned even more verdant. It seemed that half of the emerald green color on the leaves had gathered onto the petals' tips, making this jasmine lily look extraordinary. This meant that the jasmine lily had already reached elite grade. Fae name, jasmine lily. Fae species, Crassulaceae genus/Ionium genus. Fae grade, elite, 1 out of 10. Fae type, wood. Fae quality, normal. Abilities. Heal, recover open wounds. Fragrance, the faint and fresh plant fragrance can alleviate anxious mood. Fragrance, the new ability, was considered a very common ability for flower phase. The effects would be enhanced as the phase grade increased, and it wasn't anything outstanding. However, Lin Yuan realized that the jasmine lily's initial ability, heal, had changed. When it was at normal grade, heal could only slowly recover open wounds. Now that it had evolved to the elite grade, heal's effect was enhanced. Lin Yuan was staring blankly at the elite jasmine lily. As a basic healing type Fae, a jasmine lily could already be sold for 500 Federation dollars a pot, and this was because Lin Yuan had lowered the price. Larger Fae stores would normally set the price of a well-developed, normal jasmine lily to be over $700. But once a normal jasmine lily evolved into an elite one, the price would instantly increase by 10 times. Although Lin Yuan's jasmine lily had only obtained a mediocre ability at elite grade, this convention also applied to it. If he placed it on the market for $5,000, it would probably be snatched instantly. The Fae's prices had always been rather high. Take Lin Yuan's little store as an example. It only had 5 pots of normal jasmine lilies before he found this new ability. After staring blankly for a moment, Lin Yuan took a glance at the 20+ pots of normal Usnia and the elite jasmine lily. Now, he was certain about his ability. His body might not be able to preserve any spirit chi, but he wasn't useless as he could evolve Faes and increase their quality. As such, Lin Yuan slapped his thigh in joy. In the end, I am still a transmigrator who hadn't realized his cheat-like ability until now. Since I coincidentally found out about my cheat, it will allow me to rise to the top. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard a knocking sound at the door of the store. He immediately headed over to open and see who was looking for him. After taking 2 steps forward, Lin Yuan felt that there seemed to be a trace of spirit chi remaining in his body. In the past, no matter how much spirit chi he absorbed, it would rapidly leak out. Could it be that when he helped Faes to evolve, he could also improve his spiritual power? If this was really the case, then he would also be able to cultivate and become a spirit chi professional. After opening the store's door, Lin Yuan noticed Auntie Zhang pushing a wheelchair and standing in front of his store. An aged uncle, who had a mix of black and white hair, was seated in the wheelchair. Upon seeing Lin Yuan open the door, the aged uncle spoke with a hoarse voice. "Little Yuan, your Auntie Zhang is bringing me to the doctor. We will be away for 3 months, just like usual. If you have anything you are having trouble with, give a call to Auntie Zhang." Lin Yuan looked at Uncle Li, who was sitting in the wheelchair nonchalantly. Although his lower leg was wrapped with gauze, which was permeated with purplish-black blood, Uncle Li looked as if he wasn't the one that was injured. A few years back, Lin Yuan had visited Auntie Zhang and had witnessed how she had changed the bandages for Uncle Li. There had seemed to be something hidden within the flesh of Uncle Li's leg, and it looked extremely sinister and frightening. Auntie Zhang used her hand to knock on Uncle Li's head and said, "Little Yuan is much more sensible than you. Do you even need to remind him?" The wound was secreting rotting blood, but Uncle Li didn't look like he could feel it. However, after Auntie Zhang knocked on his head, Uncle Li couldn't help but rub his head. He looked just like an obedient punching bag. After knocking on Uncle Li's head, Auntie Zhang said to Lin Yuan, "Little Yuan, my mobile phone will be constantly switched on. If you encounter any problem, you have to give me a call immediately, no matter what time it is." Lin Yuan nodded to Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li. "Uncle, Auntie, don't worry." Auntie Zhang gave Lin Yuan plenty of reminders and then started to push the wheelchair toward the road intersection while still feeling worried. The terror rabbit, which was used as a cushion for Uncle Li, then shook its ears at Lin Yuan as if bidding farewell. "Uncle Li is going for his treatment more than 1 month in advance. It looks like his leg injury is getting worse." Lin Yuan had used True Data to check on Uncle Li's leg injury. Uncle Li's leg injury was actually caused by a type of bone gangrene poison and not some physical wound. This type of poison was biological, and it even carried spirit curse effects. True Data's displayed information stated that the poison originated from a poisonous worm called bone-rotting filarial worm. The bone-rotting filarial worm was a type of very evil fae. Even the weakest bone-rotting filarial worm was platinum, and they were extremely rare. The bone-rotting filarial worm would normally attack with a poison named bone-rotting poison, but it wasn't the bone gangrene's cause. In order to form the bone gangrene poison, the bone-rotting filarial worm would have to dig into the target's flesh and sacrifice itself. It would then turn its life force into a type of poison, forming the bone gangrene. Evidently, the bone gangrene was a very horrifying poison. Uncle Li has been enduring and sealing this poison inside his lower leg for so many years. Could it be that Uncle Li's spirit chi occupation is King class? Fae Evolution Merchant Chapter 9, Timely Ability. The world was very big. A century after the spirit chi awakening, scholars predicted that the planet had expanded by at least 100 times. Everyone wanted to understand more about this world when they were still alive, and it was the same for Lin Yuan. That's why every step taken must be firm and steady. After Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li walked far away, Lin Yuan returned to the store and closed the door. He wasn't planning to open for business today. Before this, Lin Yuan had always been a sickly person, and he hadn't had sufficient spiritual energy or stamina to conduct a larger-scale business for his store. However, things were different now. Lin Yuan planned to clean up the courtyard at the back. He was going to clean up the tables in the courtyard and stack them up to use as a storage area for fays. Before doing that, he carried the racks that he didn't use before and placed them in the store, allowing for more fays to be displayed. After all, Lin Yuan now had the energy to tend to more fays. Also, tending to fays and making them evolve was the only method for Lin Yuan to enhance his spiritual power. After packing and cleaning the courtyard for an entire afternoon, Lin Yuan was so tired that he couldn't even say a word. He sat on the chair for a long period before feeling alive again. At that moment, the door that Lin Yuan had closed tightly on the second floor was gently opened. Soon, a meowing and a chirping sound echoed. The chirping sound was much more pleasant than before. Evidently, Genius had realized that it had evolved and swiftly ran down from the second floor. It then jumped onto Lin Yuan's legs and said, "Yuan, Chimey, and I seem to have evolved." Genius was a fae of the intelligent cat species. The main reason it was called a housekeeping beast was that the 100 Questions beasts could converse well with humans. In addition, they were just like encyclopedias that could store a lot of information. Lin Yuan reached out and rubbed Genius' head. Upon doing that, he realized that Genius' new grayish-silver fur was much thicker than before. Furthermore, it had a sort of density, unlike before, when it had been sparse. In other words, the 100 Questions beast's fur had evolved to normal grade, and its defense had been enhanced. Chimey's spirituality wasn't as good as Genius, so it still didn't know what was happening. Chimey felt that it had slept for a long time, and it was a little embarrassed. It was standing beside Lin Yuan's ear and gently pecking at his short hair. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan was rubbing Genius, Chimey hopped onto Genius' head and imitated Lin Yuan's action as it used its small talon to stroke Genius' fur. Before this, Chimey wouldn't act like that. Lin Yuan could see that Chimey's evolution had significantly enhanced its intelligence. "Genius, do you feel anything different after you evolved?" While Lin Yuan was speaking, he used True Data to check on Genius. Fru, E, Nov, L. Fae name, 100 Questions beast. Fae species, cat species / intelligent cat species. Fae grade, normal, 2/10. Fae type, spiritual. Fae quality, normal. Abilities. Precise memory. When memorizing something, every single detail can be memorized with precision. Precise memory was a very contradictory ability. If Genius was unable to memorize many things in the past, then precise memory wouldn't make any difference. However, if genius could already memorize many things before gaining this ability, then precise memory's capability was something that Lin Yuan wouldn't dare to imagine. Genius let out a meow and said, "Yuan, I feel that I can memorize more things than before. If my memory was just a piece of red braised meat before, then my memory now is as big as 30 pieces of red braised meat." Lin Yuan had yet to eat anything today. When he heard Genius' explanation that used food as an analogy, he suddenly felt extremely hungry. However, the starving sensation didn't take away Lin Yuan's attention. Genius memory allowed it to memorize the contents of around 3 to 5 books in the past. If Genius memory had really increased 30-fold, it meant that Genius could at least memorize the contents of around 100 books. Furthermore, it could even remember things in detail. Lin Yuan had been worried about how he was going to pass the Creation Master's exam. The contents of the Creation Master's exam was to evolve a Fae, which had reached its evolution bottleneck. It might sound simple, but some preconditions must be met to take the exam. The precondition to take the Creation Master's exam was to pass the primary exams for 3 lifestyle occupations. After obtaining the proof that one passed the 3 lifestyle occupations primary exams, one would then be able to apply for the Creation Master's exam. There were plenty of lifestyle occupations, but it wasn't easy to pass the exams. Lifestyle class occupations, such as blacksmiths that forged energy ores or weavers that created silk fabrics, were all occupations that required one to have a good foundation from a young age. Forging and weaving with Faes wasn't like the normal forging and weaving processes before the spirit chi awakening. In the past, one would only need strength and nimble hands to complete the tasks. Like blacksmiths and weavers, lifestyle occupations required an understanding of Faes before they could use the forging or weaving methods to allow spiritual ingredients to fuse with each other. If Lin Yuan wanted to obtain the Creation Master's exam qualifications, these kinds of lifestyle class occupations were obviously not within his capabilities. Lin Yuan had an alternative now that Genius had evolved and obtained an ability. There were 3 lifestyle class spirit chi occupations exams that focused on knowledge. They were the Scholar, Fae Observer, and Spiritual Ingredient Analyst. These 3 lifestyle class occupations were all knowledge-based. Due to the knowledge-based exams and how seriously knowledge and research were treated, the exam standards were very strict. In each exam, one would have to answer 500 questions, and their overall score was 1,000 points. Each correct answer would award 2 points, unanswered questions would award nothing, and every wrong answer would deduct 4 points. This type of exam was trying to warn those who wanted to become researchers and scholars that they should skip the question if they didn't know the answers or were unclear. However, they must not be ambiguous and guess the answers. Furthermore, one needed at least 900 points to pass the exams. These exams might seem easy, but they were not. Putting aside the fact that the questions were crafty, if one were to answer one question wrongly, they would lose the points of 2 correct answers. Moreover, if one were to fail the exam, they would only be able to apply for the exam after 1 entire year. Due to all these reasons, the primary exams for these 3 lifestyle class occupations were the least chosen. However, others might find these 3 exams difficult, but they were the most suitable for Lin Yuan. I just have to get Genius to memorize the primary books on the Scholar, Fae Observer, and Spiritual Ingredient Analyst occupation before attempting for the exam. During the past century, housekeeping beasts had already become personal pets and were used as lifestyle assistants. When taking the lifestyle class occupation exams, the examinees were allowed to bring housekeeping beasts, like the 100 Questions beast, as assistants. However, there were also exceptions, like the Creation Master's exam, which didn't allow the examinees to bring in anything, not even spiritual ingredients, apart from themselves. They were only allowed to use the spiritual ingredients provided in the exam venue. Despite the case, this was simply a child's play for Lin Yuan. During the exam, he just had to pour his spirit chi into the Fae's body to successfully pass. One had to admit that as the Radiance Federation's first 100 Questions beast, which had evolved into a normal Fae, Genius ability was truly convenient and too timely. Fae Evolution Merchant Chapter 10, Mellow Singing. Lin Yuan knew that if he didn't have a reasonable explanation for his ability to evolve Faes, it would certainly bring in trouble. As the saying went, an outstanding tree will definitely be blown down by the wind. If a tree is too tall, the winds will never allow it to survive. It was just like how a prodigy would have a halo over their head, but jealous people would always accompany them. In addition, he couldn't attribute his ability to him being a prodigy, not to mention that his strength was still budding at the surface of the ground. If he were careless and exposed himself to the fierce winds, he might wither in an instant. The path to becoming a creation master was something that Lin Yuan had to take. Therefore, he was planning to purchase some books, which were related to the primary exams for the scholar, Fey observer, and spiritual ingredient analyst, on the star web. It should be enough for genius capacity to memorize 100 books. However, Lin Yuan also had things to fret about, as those books weren't cheap. After the Spirit Chi awakening, the internet had been crippled for over a dozen years before it had recovered. At the same time, the internet had undergone a revolution. The network was like a large-scale virtual world and was known as the Federation Star Web. When entering the Federation Star Web, everyone would need to bind themselves with a Federation citizen identity. The Star Web had entertainment, live streaming, virtual transactions, interactive and social contacting, or even ranking battles. During the last few decades, the Federation Star Web development was already able to support a second world for the Radiance Federation citizens. As for the books that Lin Yuan required, they could be purchased in the Federation Star Web's bookshop. These books were all published by high-ranked scholars, Fey observers, and spiritual ingredient analysts. Each of these books had an average price of around $100 Federation dollars. For every book that the bookshop sold, the publisher would earn a profit of around 15%. That's why the income of a lifestyle class professional was always commendable. A total of 100 books would cost around 10,000 Federation dollars in total, and that amount was almost Lin Yuan's entire wealth. Moreover, a large portion of this wealth had to be reserved for his younger sister's next year's school fees. Lin Yuan remembered that his young sister's school curriculum was about to start with Fey contract classes. The Fey contract classes were normally leaning toward actual combat. That's why he had to find a suitable high-grade Fey for his younger sister first. "I am still very poor." Lin Yuan couldn't help lamenting. "Right now, there is nothing else more important that I need to do than to earn more money. I already have a clear direction, but this direction will need Federation dollars to remove the obstacle." When Genius saw Lin Yuan frowning in his thoughts, it immediately pounced into Lin Yuan's embrace along with Chimey on its head. The 100 questions beast, Genius, might have evolved, but deep in its bones, Lin Yuan was still the most important person. When Genius was around Lin Yuan, it would always feel warmth and a steady sense of security. Chimey was still standing on Genius' head. Perhaps it could feel the changes in its body, so it started to chirp a song cheerfully. Chimey had failed to evolve into a songstress bird, and at the beginning, it didn't know how to sing. After receiving Lin Yuan's guidance, it was finally able to learn one song. In this world, Lin Yuan had only heard a few songs, and naturally didn't know how to sing them. Therefore, the song that Lin Yuan had taught to Chimey was a song that he had composed by taking reference to a poem before transmigrating to this world. In the past, Lin Yuan might always be praising Chimey when it was singing, but Chimey was singing a saliva song and couldn't bring out any flavor. But now, when Chimey sang the song again, Lin Yuan felt as if it was a phoenix calling in the Kunlun Mountains, and hibiscuses and orchids were blooming with a smile. Lin Yuan felt that he had suddenly entered a plain, where there was a horizon of grassland, and orioles were flying. The jingling spring water served as the zither, the wind blowing on the willows served as a tune, while the morning dew dripping served as the screenplay. It felt as though a bean goose was walking through the snow, and when Lin Yuan tried to look for the bean goose, it had vanished without a trace. Only the goose's footprints on the snow served as proof that it was truly there. The places where the bean goose had stepped on suddenly bloomed with wintersweet, and there was an appealing and beautiful image of a woman that was holding a book and reciting with a frown. Trees suffer from frost, their roots unable to draw warmth. A single blossom in a snow-covered village appeared last night. The wind wafts the fragrance while the birds take a peek at its brilliance. The winter and summer shared the beautiful scenery, and Lin Yuan was able to visualize this scenery because of Chimey's singing. If Chimey's voice was like a child playing around previously, then now, Chimey's voice was truly worthy for the palace, and it was at the pinnacle. It seemed like Chimey, the only sound bird that had reached normal grade, had great control over tunes. As Chimey continued singing, it realized that its voice sounded better, so it flapped its wings happily and flew around the house. Lin Yuan checked on Chimey's true data. Fey name, sound bird. Fey species, Corvidi species/Kingfisher species. Fey grade, normal, 3/10. Fey type, sound. Fey quality, normal. Abilities. Sound thrust, fire a sharp spike that is formed by sound at a designated target. Lin Yuan didn't expect Chimey to be a combat class pet. Lin Yuan immediately called out to Chimey and instructed, Chimey, launch a sound thrust at the wooden panel by the door. When Chimey heard Lin Yuan's command, it instinctively let out a distinct chirp. At the same time, Lin Yuan noticed that the wooden panel by the door had shivered a little. Lin Yuan walked over to take a look and noticed that the 1 centimeter thick wooden panel hadn't gotten penetrated. However, there was a white mark left on the wooden panel, not a shallow one at that. Lin Yuan rubbed the white mark while mentally calculating Chaime's attack force. He speculated that its driving force was probably around 3 kilograms. Although such an attack force wasn't considered outstanding among normal Faes, the attack method was superior as it was formless and invisible. It had a very fast attack speed, making it hard to dodge. Lin Yuan couldn't help but think, if I can continue nurturing Genius and Chaime, I wonder what they will become. Given his current ability, would there be a day when Genius and Chaime would evolve from normal grade to elite grade? Would they be able to continue evolving from elite to bronze, silver, gold, platinum, or even suzerain, which possessed a domain? Or was there the possibility that during the process of evolution, Genius and Chaime's quality would reach legend, transforming them into fantasy breeds? Fantasy breed had always been a sacred term in the Fae world. Fantasy breed meant that the Fae was supposed to only exist in fantasies, and not in reality. When a bronze Fae's quality reached legend, it might absorb certain willpower runes from mountains, rivers, oceans, or even the sky. It would allow the Fae to achieve a qualitative change, and only high-ranked creation masters could utilize such methods. Lin Yuan felt that if his ability could continue performing like its current state, he might be able to do the same in the future. However, presently, Lin Yuan had to visit the Fae marketplace to pick a certain type of Fae to form a contract with Morbius Spirit Lock skill. Simultaneously, he had to strive to make Chaime and Genius qualities to achieve epic before they evolved to bronze grade. A Fae's quality was ranked as followed: normal, elite, flawless, epic, and legend. When an elite/epic 1 Fae became bronze, it would undergo a gene optimization. The so-called gene optimization was to awaken a skill. There were all sorts of Fae skills, and the skill awakened was random. Therefore, plenty of Faes awakened very weak skills or skills that were incompatible with the spirit chi occupation when they evolved from elite grade to bronze grade. Freewebno, v. L. After the bronze Fae's gene optimization, its quality would fall back to normal and had to be increased from the beginning. However, if an elite Fae could increase its quality to epic before evolving, it would obtain 3 different skill choices. The contracted Fae's master could choose one of the skills. Fae contacts couldn't be exchanged, so it was the same as giving the contracted master 2 additional chances. In conclusion, having 3 choices to pick was definitely better than not having any choice to pick.